Hi guys, today we are going to do some of the basic techniques of watercolors, and all you need is the very basic supplies for this. Told you that we'll be using cold press paper. You can use any paper. Then some of the paints that are already in my palette, you can use any paints, even if you have, the, what do you call them? Student grade paints, that is also fine. Some paints come in tubes and some come in this form of, you can say, such pan style paints. You can use any paints, that is fine. So the brushes that I'll be using are watercolor brushes. You can use round brushes like this one, or you can also use a flat brush. Just make sure the brush that you're using is very soft. You don't need to use very stiff brushes that we use for acrylic and oil paints. Another thing is we spoke about the paints, and I just created this little like loosely drawn hand template, but it's okay if you don't have it. Some paper towel, and I'll be using 2 jars of water today. As I told you last time that I use 1 jar usually, but today we'll be using a lot of colors. So in that case, we'll be, mudding up the water a lot. Yeah. So we can get started with our first technique. I'll be using the flat brush, but if you don't have a flat brush, that is fine. You can go ahead with the whatever brush you have. So starting with our flat wash. Flat wash is basically a wash that is like laying down the paint on paper, and it should be spread evenly. That is the main idea behind that. So I'll take some wet paint, and you can see I'm adding enough water just to make it very runny, and just loading up the brush like so. And then I'll just fill up the whole box with the paint evenly. Like so. So we're trying to distribute the paint evenly throughout this box. Yep. Okay. So this is the flat wash, and we also can call it as wet on dry technique, because the wet on dry is basically the surface that means the paper is dry, and we are using wet paint on top of that, and we're spreading it very evenly. So this is also referred to as wet on dry. So after wet on dry or flat wash, we can go on to our wet on wet. That I will take a round brush, and maybe I'll just use the flat brush for now. And wet on dry, wet on wet is basically the surface needs to be wet first, and then we'll add some paint on it on wet surface. So I'll just use plain water and spread it just like we did in the first wash. Just trying to cover up the whole box. Just make sure that you are making the paper wet enough so that you don't see any dryness on that surface. So just to check, you can lift your paper and just check in the light like that. Okay, we have enough water, and it also depends on the type of paper that you're using. If you're using a very grainy paper or highly textured paper, in that case you may need to add more water, but this paper is not very textured, so it's fine. So what I'm going to do is I'll add some paint. I'll load the brush, and then I'll add the paint like this. I'll take more paint. And now you can see that because the surface was already wet, the paint is taking its own shape and it's spreading out itself. This is called wet on wet technique. If we were using a very high-end paper like Archie's or something like that, the paint would have spread even better. But this paper is little, a cheaper one, so you can see that it's not really flourishing a lot, blooming a lot, not flourishing. Okay, so this is called wet on wet technique. And we can also use two different colors. So let's say I'll just do that thing here. I'll take some yellow and drop in some random areas. So what's happening here is the yellow is spreading in the water and it's actually mixing with the blue and creating this greenish blue tone, depending on how much blue we have or how much yellow we have. So this technique is basically used by most of the artists who paint galaxies, landscapes, and skies, such kind of paintings. So people who do that, they use this technique a lot. All right, so we need to let it dry and just try not to touch it while it is wet. Next is glazing. Glazing is layering, basically. So I'll just put one wash of pinkish tone first. Very simple, just like we did in the wet on dry, the first technique, just covering the whole area. Like that. And we need to let it dry since watercolors are like, they flow very easily and they mix when they are wet, they just mix very well. So we need to let it dry. And the beauty of watercolors is that they're transparent. So when we layer them up, let's say we have this pink here, you can see it's very transparent. It's not very opaque. So when we have like, let's say it's dried completely, and I use different color, either blue or yellow or maybe pink again, and I create another layer. That layer will be visible, like the lower layer will be still visible, and that is the beauty of watercolors. So we'll wait for it to dry and then we'll come back and do the layering thing. In the meantime, what we can do is we can start with our glazing technique. Not the glazing, sorry, gradient technique. So gradient is basically, you must be aware of that. Gradient is like change in tone value or change in the color from one to another. So we'll use two colors for this one. So we'll start with a very beautiful bright red shade here. You can use this with wet on wet or wet on dry as you like it. I'm just using wet on dry here. Now I'm halfway through this box. What I'll do is I'll wash the brush and make this edge a little wet with plain water. And now I'll take some yellow in my brush while this paint is still wet. So you have to be a little quick because my fan is on, so it's drying up very fast. So I'll try to do it as fast as I can. And then I'll try to touch these two paints in the middle. Now, the thing is that, as I told you, that it's very dry here, so the paint is drying up very fast. If I had used wet on wet technique, in that case, they would have like flown into each other. So I'll just try to make it a little wet over here or add some more paint, some red paint, something like this. So you can see that the paints are literally flowing in each other, but due to the fact that the paper and the dryness, it's not doing its thing very well. So I would recommend try with the wet on wet technique if you can. So what I'll do is I'll try that with wet on wet also. Let's do it somewhere here, maybe. Something like this. Then I'll start with my red. Now you can see how this red is flowing towards the bottom. And let's take a blue shade because I know that these colors mix very well. And you can also try to, you know, tilt your paper and see if they are doing the magic or not. So like this. So what happens is like they will mix in the middle. I don't know, it's not working now. It's a bummer today. So anyways, maybe I'll try with another paper. So you can see that they have created a little orange shade over here. But it's not the perfect wash, I would say, because it never happens. Today, it's exception. Okay, so we'll wait for this to dry and we'll see if I can pick up another paper in the meanwhile, and we'll try this gradient wash again on a different paper. Then we have dry brush technique. So the dry brush technique is like you're using a very dry brush. Let's just take and pick up a dry brush, some synthetic brush if you have, any brush is okay. You just need to wet it once before you start. Then you can take some paint. Now these two puddles are very wet, so I'll just try to take some paint from this palette directly from the color itself and just try to clean the brush a little bit because we don't need a lot of water, and then we'll try to make some strokes. So this kind of technique is used for making textures. Even sometimes some people also use this in calligraphy or lettering, something like that. So this is really a very cool technique to give textures in your paintings. Just make sure that in this technique, you're not using a lot of water. That's all. Another technique is called negative painting. So negative painting is like you have a subject, you have a drawing, but you are not painting inside that drawing, you're actually painting outside that. That is the negative space. So let's say we have a shape here. Let's say this triangle. And we don't want to cover the triangle, rather we want to cover the outside of this triangle. So I'll take my paint and start painting over. We can use wet on wet as well as wet on dry. So here I'm using wet on dry and just touching the edge of the triangle, not going inside that. If you're using wet on wet technique, you just need to be a little careful that you can control the water and paint. Let's just try that also. So I'm adding water just to try the wet on wet technique here and not going inside the triangle at all. Here it is. All right, so let's just add a different color here and I'm adding some yellow. You would have seen such paintings with negative painting. You can also use masking fluid or use a tape, or maybe you can also use some resist techniques, which I can talk about later if we have time. And negative painting really looks good if you're painting florals. Sometimes you just have your florals and you can try to paint in the background, not on the florals. This technique is really good to improve your brush skills. So if you want to, improve your brush strokes and brush control, this technique is really, really good for that. Next one is lifting. So lifting is, I think I mentioned this technique in the last session also. So let's say you have added a lot of water, or maybe you are painting something very realistic and you want to show the highlights in that to bring the realism. So in that case, what happens is you need to lift some paint to get the whiteness of the paper. So I'm just adding some random blue here, like so. And what I feel is that I have added a lot of blue. Here you can see. All right. Now what I want is I want to have some highlight in the middle, let's say, or let's say you made a mistake and you added a lot of water. What you can do is you can rinse off your brush and dab it on your paper towel, make it completely dry as much as you can, or you can take a separate dry brush and then you can just roll it over on the wet area. So it's actually sucking up the extra amount of water and paint that is lying over there. You can see that, right? So we got the highlight. I'm doing the same thing over here. Something like this. Is it okay? Is my speed okay, Patricia? Okay, thank you. Okay, so I am doing the wet on wet again. And let's drop in some blues like this. And something like this. Or maybe add a lot of blue. Some purple. Wow, look at this purple. I like it. Wow. Okay. So I'm just adding a lot of paint here. Because when you're painting skies, you actually need to wet your paper very well and then start painting it. Here we go. Okay. Now, let's say you want to add some clouds to the sky. So what I will do is I'll take a tissue paper and make it smaller like this, and then just dab it in some of the areas very gently, like this, and then randomly going to the other part. Yeah, so this leaves a very soft cloudy effect. You can also use cotton, I guess. You can try with the cotton if it works. It should actually work very well, better than a tissue paper, I guess. So let's try with the edge now. What happens? So you can see the edge is working much better than the inner side of the tissue paper. Yeah, so we got some clouds in our sky. Okay, so coming back to our glazing technique, what we'll do is we'll use the flat brush again, and this time I will go with same, maybe red color. And just checking with your finger if it is completely dry, and it is. So I'll just make some strokes like this. And you can see that how beautiful it looks. So if you would have seen some patterns on bed sheets or what do you call kitchen towels, this kind of pattern is always seen in such things, right? So this is how we do glazing in our watercolors, with our watercolors. So I just wanted to see if I can show you a better example for the glazing, the gradient wash. And I'm just looking for a better paper here. Let's see if I have something. Yeah, I have something. All right, let's just keep it aside. Okay, this one is a better quality paper. This is, I think, Archie's paper or maybe Fabriano, whatever it is. It's a scrap piece of paper. So what I'll do is I'll make a wet wash, and I hope it works this time. It should not be a flop again. I hope you can see, right? Yeah. Okay. So I have enough water on my paper, as you can see, right? So what I'll do is I'll add some red. I'll add some red over here. And now you can see the difference, how this red was flowing on Canson Excel and how it is flowing on this paper. This is why people recommend good quality papers. But Canson Excel and such papers are always good to try out new, new techniques and just practice work. It's completely okay. And now I'm going to use some yellow and start adding it from the bottom. Okay. And there we can see that they have started to merge a little like this. Again, if you can see, they are starting to merge, but it's very slow. And you can take a help, like you can move around and let the paints flow in like within each other, and they will create very beautiful effects like this. You can see that the yellow is literally going upwards and red is making streams towards the bottom. So this is called the gradient. And if you want to make it even, I would say just go with simple wet on dry technique and take watery paint, not very dry paint, take watery paint. And then what I'll do is I'll take yellow and then start from here, not from the bottom. I'll start from the middle itself. And then that way they will merge in a better way. Now you can see that they're merging very well, right? You can see some oranges coming up and here also, okay? So this is called the gradient or variegated wash, what we call it. So apart from that, sorry, my camera just stopped working. All right. So apart from that, we also have some of the brush strokes. I don't know how much time do we have now. Any idea? We have time, I guess. So we can also practice some of the brush strokes. If you have any questions regarding the techniques, you can just unmute yourself and let me know. Otherwise, I'll go to the brush techniques. I'm all over the place today. Okay, so for the brush techniques, take whatever brushes you have and just try different strokes with them. So let's just take this brush, and what I'll do is whenever you buy a new brush, especially the round brushes, which are the most versatile brushes in watercolors, what you should do is you should always check the point. It should be very pointy and it should have a nice belly. So just to test it out, what we'll do is we'll load the brush with some paint and just touching, just making it a little vertical and then making thin strokes, thin straight lines like this. So as you can see that the point of this brush is not very, very thin. We'll try another brush. Let's try this one again. This is a smaller brush from King Art Supplies, and I'll do the same thing with this one. And you can see the difference here. Yeah. Let's try another brush. This one. I think I'll show you this one. This is Quill Brush from Raphael, and this is also very beautiful brush. So just taking some paint and do the same thing with this one. Now you can see, even though this brush has a very fat belly, still it is making very fine and thin lines. So this is one thing that you need to make sure that if you're buying a round brush, just make sure that it has a nice point. And if you press it down, it should make fat lines like this. So this is the method that we use for painting leaves. So what we do is we start with a very thin from the tip and then press the brush down and then lift the brush up like this. Now, if you want to make it a little thicker, you can do the same thing, coming here and do the same thing like this. Okay. Again, we'll do the same thing again, starting with the tip, pressing down, coming up, pressing down, coming up. You can leave some white space in between. That looks really nice. Another practice that you can do with your brushes is doing different strokes, like making such circles. These drills are for people who want to do calligraphy and brush lettering, something like that. You can also make such strokes, opposite side and vertical lines. And yeah, that's like, you can also try making straight lines like this in different angles. So we started with a vertical brush like this, then you can tilt it a little bit, making a little thicker line, and then you can tilt it even more to make the thickest stroke with that brush like this. So I think that's all about our watercolor basic techniques. There are more techniques, we can call them as advanced techniques. Like you can use salt, you can use alcohol, all that stuff, but those are not really the basic techniques. They are just like fun advanced techniques if you want to bring textures in your paintings. So you can use them. Otherwise, these are the basic important techniques that you should always practice if you are just starting out with watercolors. These exercises really help in bringing out the best brush control and getting most out of your watercolor paintings. So let me know if you have any questions, and then we can wrap up. You can unmute now, I think. You can talk.
Okay. This was very, very useful.
Oh, yeah.
I had no idea. And the results are, mine of course aren't as beautiful as yours, but it's very.
You want to show your paper? I would like to see if you're okay with that.
The Canson one. Wait.
Okay. Yeah, the same one.
Wait.
Oh, you did a great job, Patricia. I must say, yeah, it was great.
This really fun to do. I had no idea how to how the results of these techniques would be. So wow, this was really amazing. Thank you so much.
I'm glad you liked it. Yeah, I really wish more people join us next time, because I'm really doing it with my heart. And yeah, I'll share the replay again on YouTube again. Okay. Are you okay that your face will be there? Are you okay with that?
That's okay.
No? Okay, sure. Because I also had another camera going on, but I think it has low battery. So I was thinking of, showing that footage in the video, but if it doesn't work, I'll show this recording only. If you're okay with that.
Yeah, I think that's okay.
Okay, sounds great. All right. If you have any ideas or any questions, you can let me know if you want any particular subject that we should cover next time. So I'll be happy to do that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for joining.